Thank you, Senator Abetz. Senator Xenophon.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I too support this bill and commend the government for introducing this bill, but do share with the reservations that Senator Abetz has raised in relation to what appear to be funding cuts to this agency. This is an important bill. I also should declare that I have been for many years a patron of the Asbestos Victims Association in South Australia, one that I shared the I was a co-patron with a number of other people, including former South Australian Premier Mike Rann, and I was very happy to be part of that, and I still am, and I want to pay tribute to the work that Terry Miller, who received an Order of Australian Medal, and his team have done in terms of selfless voluntary work over many years to support victims of asbestos, to advocate for changes in the law, and I was immensely proud to support to be part to introduce legislative changes in the South Australian Parliament back in November 2005 that were eventually passed with bipartisan support to improve significantly the compensation payable to asbestos victims. And I want to pay tribute to Melissa Haylock, then a relatively young woman in her early 40s who suffered from mesothelioma, who has since sadly passed away, and to her family. I pay tribute to her courage for speaking out. She was instrumental in changing the law in South Australia. This bill is important. It's important to acknowledge how serious an issue asbestos is in this country. I note from information provided by the Asbestos Victims Association of South Australia back in 2005 that with a latency period of between 20 to 50 years post-exposure, it is expected that mesothelioma cases and deaths aren't due to peak in South Australia until 2020, with up to 2,000 South Australians dying from mesothelioma and up to double that number dying of other asbestos-related diseases, including asbestosis and asbestos-related lung cancer. So this is a serious issue, and this is something that could have been avoidable in the sense that we have known about the dangers of asbestos for many years now, but it was still being marketed, still being sold up until the late 1980s, and that's why the book Killer Company on James Hardie was, I think, quite illustrative of the sort of problems in terms of there being knowledge, yet the product was still being sold. I share with Senator Abetz the concerns raised about the funding cuts, and also if we're spending money on promoting, for instance, the National Broadband Network, in a huge advertising campaign, and it's something that the Coalition has done perhaps even bigger and better in the past with other campaigns, and Work Choices comes to mind, then I think that is not a good use of money. It should be spent here. And I think the other issue is that asbestos victims groups and research groups around the country need the money to actually push research that could end up saving lives. There have been gene splicing therapy that has been tried in the United States with some mixed success, but we need to get a breakthrough because at the moment mesothelioma is almost invariably a death sentence, and that's why I would like to think that this council will provide that research role. And my question to the Parliamentary Secretary representing the government is, to what extent does the government see the research role of this agency being important in not just preventing exposure, but if someone does have an asbestos-related disease, what role does this council play in advocating, in pushing for research for if not a cure, at least medication or treatment that can prolong life in an appreciable and significant way? Because right now some of the experimental treatments may prolong life by a few precious months, but at the moment it is largely a death sentence, usually within 9 months if you're diagnosed with mesothelioma. So, having said that, Mr Acting Deputy President, I support the legislation. I would like to think that this is part of a broader effort to reduce significantly the impact of asbestos in this country. I note, Mr Acting Deputy President, the controversy recently in relation to the NBN and Telstra and the questions of asbestos exposure. It's an issue that's been brought to my attention by a number of constituents in South Australia. I think that this is an issue that won't go away, and I think it's important that we don't have that next wave of asbestos sufferers, of mesothelioma victims in the next 20 to 30 to 40 or even 50 years' time. That's why it's so important we get it right now, but it's also important that we have enough funding, enough research to actually find a cure, or at least something that will prolong the life extensively of mesothelioma sufferers. I support this bill.
Thank you, Senator